Hi, I'm Ellen Pollack from Business Week. I'm thrilled to be here today. We're just going to quickly introduce everybody: Georgine Anton, Dirk Standen, Lee Sosin, and Eric Moreno. We're going to talk about content marketing and native advertising. In the past, I know there's been sort of pro and con discussions, and we're going to go beyond that here and really talk about, since it's here to stay, best practices. We're going to talk about how best to do it, and we're going to talk about how some of the big companies doing it are handling it in their approaches. We're going to start with a definition of native advertising as opposed to content marketing. And what I really enjoy about this is when we discussed this backstage, there was a spirited discussion on what was the difference. So I think that's a sign of sort of how fast things are moving in the industry. So I'm going to start with Eric and ask you for your definitions and then kind of like a big picture look at where you see things going.
Thanks, Ellen, and thanks everybody for coming out for the first panel in the morning. So a couple of things. First, I'm new to the industry. I've been with Time Inc. almost 5 months. I work with Joe Rip and the executive team at Time Inc. in leading our transformation. And the reason I think I'm here is that I have a pretty strong point of view about being able to build strategically in the branded content space, which is the area I overall bucket the native and content marketing. So I'm also tend to be controversial because I'm not married to the past at all. I don't know how to put together a magazine. I don't know how to put any of these things together, the amazing talent and work that most of you do. So broadly defined though, define the market. For me, branded content is a business that's $3 to $4 billion as of right now, and it's going to grow to $9 billion by 2018. And the access to that marketplace is through all the journalists, all the content creators, and the storytellers that the industry has. That's the only way. But you have to make that distinction away from pure journalism, the separation of church and state, into understanding that some of those content creating resources have to be devoted to the service of the advertiser. And it's interesting because that's easy for an outsider to say. As I talk to people in this business, that is almost blasphemous. And for me, that's an interesting discussion then that has to be had. But at the end of the day, as you think about the business that we're in, the competitive set we're in, the difficulty for the consumer to hear noise from a message, and for you to be able to then lean into that and make a profitable use of your greatest asset, you have to be in this business. So I will now answer the question. As a good politician, I get my sound bites in first. For me, the difference at the tactical level is that in branded content, you're actually offering creative services for the brand, and they may then choose to distribute it within their media properties. Native, to me, allows you to take editorial resources for your brand and being able to then put it and distribute it through your media channel.
So Lee, tell us a little bit about what's going on at Hearst and the relationship between edit and advertising and just what your goals are.
Sure. So at Hearst, we actually came up with our own labels for things because we always start from the audience and work backwards. We want, and I think this is where the FTC is going, and we'll probably talk about that as well, but to make sure that we have full transparency to the audience as to when a brand was involved and when a brand was not involved in the creation of content. So we talk internally about things like sponsored edit, which just provides a brand great contextual environments to run their media, but they had no say and no influence onto what was created. It's just a contextual alignment, it's adjacency, which is something that this industry's been doing forever.
For a long time.
Exactly. And then we actually refer to things as co-branded content because we believe very strongly that for content to work, it has to carry the quality standards of our brands. So when we do a partnership and we say it's Esquire Plus or we say it's Cosmopolitan Plus, it's because we fully align that content with the rest of the voice of that brand. And so we look at it as co-branded content. We're incredibly transparent to the reader as to any involvement from the advertiser. Our editorial's never for sale, but we believe strongly in native, as Eric does, as it's a huge part of our business. And content in general is just a huge part of the way that brands want to connect with our audiences. So we work very collaboratively between our branded content studio and our editorial teams to make sure that voice is maintained, quality is maintained, and at the end of the day, it works for the reader.
And so, how exactly does edit work with the content marketing folks? I mean, is it a collaboration from the very beginning, or tell us a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. I think fundamentally, readers don't lower their standards when they see a brand next to a piece of content. In fact, most of the time they raise their standards. So we work very hard to make sure that that content really delivers entertainment or service to that reader. The way that we do that is we have a separate branded content studio, but they work very closely, as does our digital marketing team and our integrated marketing teams, with the editorial side to find out what are the topics, what are the areas of focus, what are readers going to respond to. The branded content studio actually goes off and creates the content, but aligns it very closely with the voice and the purpose and what the editorial teams have told them, this is going to work or this is not going to work. The nice thing about being part of a digital media organization is they're getting feedback from their audiences 300 times a day. So they can help pick topics, pick headlines that we know are going to resonate with the audience. Again, everything is, so we want to make sure that the editors are we never staple anything on. That's, I think, is we never staple anything on. Everything, from the editorial side, they want to be involved because that piece of content is living in their environment. It's reflection on their brand.
So it's all part of one product,
basically. So it's all part of one experience for the reader. And that experience has to be high quality. So they don't write the content, but they can advise and help shape what the original idea is.
Right. And Dirk, at 23 Stories, just tell everybody a little bit about how that was created and how the edit and the ad folks work together.
Right, so 23 Stories is Conde Nasts' relatively new branded content studio. It was launched in 2015, and I joined in September from Style.com, so I came over from the editorial side, and I think one of the reasons they wanted me was because we're set up to work not only closely but directly with the editors and writers of the individual Conde Nast titles. So we will collaborate with them in any number of ways, beginning with the idea. We'll get their input on it. We'll say, is this crazy? Would you ever do this? We'll get specific suggestions from editors to make the idea stronger and more aligned with what that publication would be doing in any case. And then when we're actually creating the content, often an editor or a writer from one of the publications will create it. There are other instances where it makes more sense for our unit to create the content, but then in that case, obviously, we'll also work very closely with their editorial teams to make sure it aligns with their.
So it's a little bit different than what Lee's doing at
Yes,
first, in that editors are sometimes creating the content.
We set this up, really as a point of differentiation. I think everyone in this sort of new and growing part of the industry does things differently, but I know, for example, someone like the New York Times, I think it's completely separate. Other people, it's kind of a certain level of collaboration, but we really wanted it to be a direct relationship, and to give advertisers access to to the sort of world-class creative talent that Conde Nast can offer. So. And at the same time, those editors are the people who know best what works for their publications and what they feel makes sense for their readers. So, I guess you could say Conde Nast maybe came a little late to the field, but we've certainly embraced it wholeheartedly.
You're kind of pushing the envelope a little bit, which kind of brings us to the question that editors are always talking about, which is how is the content labeled? And now that the FTC has weighed in again on this, how is that? How is the FTC rules changing your lives, or is it just sort of the same as usual? And how much do you think about labeling?
obviously we think about it really, really carefully, and in fact, we were somewhat pleased because when the FTC came out with their new guidelines, the sort of labeling we'd already implemented actually fit in with their recommendations, and we didn't actually have to change what we'd already sort of put in place. And I think that's because we are sort of very clear about how we label this content. You know, we're not trying to fool the readers or the viewers. And, you know, we have a sort of internal group that meets regularly that has a representative from 23 Stories, a representative from sort of editorial, and a representative from Conde Nasts legal team. And they regularly sort of review projects we're working on to make sure that, you know, it sort of isn't doing anything that the FTC wouldn't approve of.
And do you always have a lawyer
take it very seriously, I guess, is the answer.
Do you always have a lawyer looking at your content before it goes up?
No, they're not. No, I mean, they're not looking at sort of individual content in that sense. It's more they're sort of reviewing what we're doing generally and making sure we're not sort of, you know, going crazy or off the deep end. Or, you know, at the same time, we can go to them if we're like, you know, does this feel right?
Right.
You know, but most of the time, I think, you know, our editors are policing that in a way more
Pretty much,
closely than anyone
right.
else would. So
That's like that's the topic that all editors bring up when they start talking about this kind of branded content. And Lee, has the FTC rules making your life different, or are they underscoring what you've done before? Or
You know, I actually think that the FTC rules are great for this industry because, you know, I think magazine media companies have always thought very carefully about how they label things. They've always taken the step to separate church and state, or to be transparent about when an advertiser is playing in the space and when they are not. So I actually think it levels the playing field. I think that you know, you've had over the last several years the influencer marketplace come online, and that has, I think, turned it into the Wild West, where a brand can go directly to, you know, a 22-year-old who makes YouTube videos out of her bedroom, and, you know, there is no history of being carefully considered about how you label things and the separation of church and state. So applying the same strict labeling guidelines to that influencer who, you know, typically doesn't reveal that they're getting paid to, you know, promote a certain piece of beauty, you know, product or what have you, applying the same standards to that person as they do to established brands is, I think, fantastic, because quality will rise to the top.
And Georgine, I mean, I think it's a good time to talk about like what the client actually wants. And at Meredith, you are actually not really working with the magazine brands themselves. You are creating content for advertisers. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing, but also tell us like what are our advertisers really trying to accomplish, and what are basically their aims?
Great. So at Meredith, we are operating as a completely separate marketing services agency called Meredith Accelerated Marketing. We were created, believe it or not, in 1969 as a classic custom publisher. And over the years, we've evolved till today. We call ourselves a content marketing digital agency, and we only work directly for clients to help them with their content marketing, video content, social media. And what they're looking for today is, there's an interesting stat that I just saw. 78% of CMOs believe the future of marketing is in content. So they're trying to figure this out. We as publishers know it. It's our DNA, right? We know content marketing. So what we're doing, we're 600 people strong at Meredith Accelerated Marketing, and every day we work with clients to help them leverage content for their own business. So we help them develop very sophisticated content strategies for their company. We help them build content calendars across huge organizations with multiple lines of business to drive efficiencies and quality that ladders up to their brand. And then last, but in no way least, we also help them measure that content so that they can show their senior management that their content is delivering on their business goals. So content marketing, you know, in my world, is only getting more and more sophisticated, and so many clients out there who are also Meredith advertisers in many cases, really need our help in bringing that thinking of a publisher to their business.
So that's a completely different way of thinking than certainly where I grew up at the Wall Street Journal and then at Bloomberg Business Week. It's a whole different way of thinking, especially including the measurement, which is so important to advertisers.
Right.
It strikes me, Eric, that at Time Inc., where you have news publications and where there's been such a delineation for so long, that you're sort of in an unusual situation because you can't do sort of the blurring of the lines as easily as can be done at Hearst or Conde Nast. And since you've come in relatively recently to the magazine media world, how are you handling at a place at like Time Inc., where it's so much of it is news, or at least part of it is news?
I think that's a great question. First of all, I think your strategy has to be both. So for us, we have the analogous effort right now with that vertical. We have launched the Foundry, which has the first vertical in the drive focused on autos. It's branded content. It is really in service of the advertisers, but we obviously are creating content that then aggregates audiences that are enthusiastic about that content. On the other side, and you bring up a great question, given that the resources that we have across our 23, 24 brands are all dedicated with the best storytellers, the best journalists in the world, my view is that it's just a resource allocation question. So in other words, if you could dedicate 10% of the staff's time to do native content, and you package and clearly label that is sponsored by an advertiser, then that starts creating a revenue stream at the core of what you are actually doing, which is creating content every single day. And that's native posts, native video. It's what the upstarts are doing. And it's just a necessity of, strategically, for us to be able to do that. Now, for us, that's an enormous opportunity. Jen Wong recently joined us from Pop Sugar. She's a digital veteran. And she's brought a framework that I think has resonated with me as I try to communicate macro into micro, which is think about each one of our brands as the ultimate creative agencies for brands, for advertisers. If you are a reader of People, that means something. If you're a reader of Time, that means something. If you're reading a Sports Illustrated, that audience means something and aggregates in a way that means something. Advertisers have always wanted to be part and to be next to the content we created. We're just not shifting that distinction to some of it could be directly sponsored by the advertiser.
But you've created something sort of separate with the Foundry, right?
Correct. I think you need to do both. That's exactly the point. You need to be able to think of it almost as the Foundry, as just going with a salesperson and a creative editor to go say, what story, advertiser, do you want to tell? And we're going to be a creative shop for you to tell a great story, and then figure out how to distribute on-Time Inc. properties or off-Time Inc. properties. The distinction, if you do this, say, with Real Simple, which has a very loyal, committed audience, and you go to the Container Store, as you do a post around what are the 10 best ideas for organizing in the spring break cleanup, that's within the stream of what Real Simple does in service of its readers, its service for the advertiser. You have to do both, and I do not see any path for companies to be precious about doing one only or not doing the other.
And what about at Time?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Look, I think we have some phenomenal people there. We had an offsite last week, and again, I'm still learning. We did specific case study on how Time could play here, and they have this, this Time video series that is out in space. It's in the space station. Well, the story, it was fascinating to me. The editor had gone out with the publisher and looked for somebody to sponsor the series. Well, Boeing makes the space station. It is the natural advertiser.
Right.
It is a compelling, amazingly visual story. It is magazine media at its best because it is creating and has access to NASA the way no other content producer can. So there's ways to do it. The only thing that limits us is our creativity, which, by the way, is boundless, and our ability to think differently. That's it.
So, Lee, how have editors adjusted to this new world? I mean, obviously, you're working with editors and you're working with advertisers, and has it been more of an adjustment for clients or more of an adjustment for editors?
I think that both clients and editors exist in the modern world, and this is this is the way that the world works today. I think that the editors actually appreciate and are willing participants and enthusiastic participants in this process because, again, they are able to, with these resources, create great content that serves their audience. And if you start with the audience first, and if you make audience the thing that you love, if that's your religion, everything derives from that. So what can I do in partnership with this brand to deliver real value to my audience? And I think the way that we do it very well is we always try to find a way to celebrate the authority of a brand that we're working with. So if you celebrate the authority, we live in a world today where people follow brands on social media. People are brand social. They want to hear from brands if it's in the right way. I want to get fitness advice from Nike. I want to get style advice from Nordstrom. So if I figure out a way to celebrate the authority of that brand and then marry it up with the authority that resides and has been built over 50, 60, 70, 100 years with some of our brands, then that combination is actually an extra benefit to the reader. They say, wait a second, this magazine media brand, Marie Claire, that I love, and this hair care brand, they've partnered to give me hair tips. That's an added value to them if you celebrate the authority that's inherent in that brand.
And at Conde Nast, can you give us an example of how you're doing that, even if you can't name a client, but an example of how you're serving readers and serving advertisers at the same time?
Yes. So I think a lot of the programs that 23 Stories works on, go over a period of several months. And I think what we try to do is to have a sort of range of content, some of it that might have very little integration, but that sort of aligns with the theme that the advertiser, that is important to the advertiser and is the story they want to tell. Right up to sort of videos that actually include the product. We're sort of working on a big campaign with Chevrolet at the moment that I think is pretty interesting. It's around their new Malibu. And, even after you do this for a short time, I think you get a sense for when an advertiser really does believe in their product and when they're just kind of bullshitting. And Chevrolet is, really behind the new model of the Malibu, and it's really nicely designed now. They've integrated technology in a way that really makes it a comfortable experience for the reader. For the driver, the passenger. And so their whole sort of national ad campaign and everything else is that they're going beyond what you'd expect from a car in this class. So, we sort of came up with this idea that the Conde Nast and Chevrolet would team up to bring you the year of the unexpected, that we would have a whole 12 months of kind of unexpected content across 5 of our main titles. And, it's a mix. So, and Vogue, Vanity Fair, Glamour, Self, GQ are all doing monthly columns that somehow speak to the idea of the unexpected. They had complete editorial freedom in choosing what the particular sort of execution was, what the topic was. Chevrolet does not see the content or have any input in it. But it does say this is part of an unexpected series that's brought to you by Malibu. But so that's sort of at one end, I think, of sort of what we're trying to do here for Chevrolet. Then we will have a lot of digital content that will roll out over the next 12 months that will speak much more directly to their theme. And we will, make a video series that actually incorporates the car in it. Though we have a pretty great idea, I think, that I can't sort of talk about now in case someone steals it, but that makes it, I think, very entertaining and aligns with our brands. But that will actually feature the car, and obviously, it's labeled very clearly that that's branded content. So I think the idea is by having this combination of different kinds of storytelling and different levels of integration, that over the period of the next few months we will, hopefully get our readers sort of associating Chevrolet with being unexpected, with going beyond expectations, and we'll get Conde Nast readers to sort of try the Chevrolet and think about the Chevrolet, and obviously one of the reasons Chevrolet comes to Conde Nast is because, again, they feel this car is so above what you'd expect from this class that they feel they can sort of reach a new kind of level of potential consumers that Conde Nast can deliver.
So that's obviously very elaborate. It's a plan, a campaign that goes over months, that is probably very expensive. What's keeping clients from just going on YouTube and going on Snapchat and social media? I mean, with the clients that you're talking to, Georgine, is that something they're thinking about a lot, and is that something that you see as competing with magazine brands?
I mean, I think it's just one more way to distribute the content. So we think a lot, if you could already tell, about content and how to get the brand's content out into the marketplace. And I think social media, particularly, of course, if we're talking to a millennial audience, is a great way to do it. And we spend a lot of time with our clients helping them use those channels effectively.
Yeah, I think so. When we're making this content, obviously we're using all our social media channels and what other levers we have to promote it. But in many cases, we're also sort of negotiating rights for this content so that the advertiser can use it on their own site, can use it on YouTube, can use it in any way they want. So in a way, I think to your point about being a creative agency for some of these brands, we're not just creating it for our own sites, but it's also hopefully great content that they can use in any
They can use it. So it's sort of multi-purpose content that they can use on all channels, and Snapchat and YouTube.
Well, and the thing is that strategically you verticalize. There's actually pockets of excellence. My view is that the strength of this industry and the people in it are squarely in the content creation capability. That's the strength, and that's what needs to be leveraged. You then have content management, which is hard, because if you create a lot of content, you actually have to figure out how to manage across clients and for clients. And those are capabilities you could buy. And then you have the content distribution, which is becoming a very sophisticated science all its own. Because if you're going to create content for Snapchat, you have to understand that platform. It's different than Instagram. It's different than YouTube. It's just a plethora of capabilities. But we're a big company, or at least for us. If you specialize in some of those capabilities and leverage our 400 sellers, I mean, there is no reason we cannot absolutely drive new business and transform ourselves. Because at the end of the day, all these startups that have all the buzz, no pun intended, are literally craving for either the creative side or the sales force that a lot of our companies have. So we're standing on just tremendous opportunity, but we have to have a framework of where we're trying to go, change the thinking of our people to go get that opportunity, and then build from there.
I actually think that the distribution point is the most important point, because anybody can make content. People make it better than other people, but anybody can make content. Agencies can make content for clients. The clients can hire people to make it for themselves. They can have internal groups. I think what makes it different, and what we think about is, when a consumer is waiting in line at Starbucks and they're flipping through their phone, they are much more likely to click on a post that carries one of our brands than just an advertiser's brand, because we have a decades-long relationship of being on their side, of delivering, of not asking a lot in return. We want to help them live better lives, be more entertained, have funny things to share with their friends, so that when we partner with an advertiser, and again, be fully transparent that that's the partnership. But when it comes in partnership with one of our brands, it cuts through the noise, it brings them to the front, and that's what they're paying for. They're paying for the authority and the distribution that resides in brands that people love.
So we're out of time, and I think that's actually a good place to kind of leave it. And as an editor, I'll just say it sounds like content is king, so we're happy. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us and for this discussion. I know we could go on forever, but thanks a lot.